at present. So let us talk about the standardization part. So we had discussed that the WTO also encourages that you should be using international standards and you should harmonize your standards with the international standards. So when we come to the international standards, the generally accepted things are the ISO and the IEC, which are making the standards. So ISO, let us talk about the ISO first. ISO is the International Organization for Standardization. It is an independent, non-governmental organization with a membership of 172 national standards bodies representing ISO in their country. For every country, there is only one member per country. In case of India, the national standard body is the BIS, Bureau of Indian Standards. So BIS is the founder member of the ISO, and it is also a member of the IEC since 1947. See, ISO was set up in, yesterday was, by the way, the World Standards Day. Are you aware? World Standards Day?
No, sir.
Okay, 14th October is celebrated as the World Standard Day, and there is a World Standards Corporation, WSC, in which the ITU, ISO, and the IEC, they come together. Yeah, Ashish Saab, I will answer your query. Why ISO and IEC both are there? I'll answer your query. So there are 172 national standards bodies which are representing ISO. Each country has one member. In our case, it is the BIS. Now, through the members, the ISO brings together experts to share knowledge and develop voluntary, consensus-based, market-relevant international standards which support innovation and provide solutions to global challenges. The process of making standards is, as you can see, that you make committees for broad disciplines under that specific subjects. You make, the committees at the international level also and at the national level also. The work is through the committees where you bring together the experts of the field like manufacturers, users, regulators, labs, all these people, they come together and they are nominated into these committees. So for every subject, there is a committee. So at the national level, there is a committee, there is an international level committee. They try to, match the work being done at the international level. The corresponding national committee is there, which is called the National Mirror Committee of the International Committee, NMC, or the National Mirror Committee. So as to, follow the work being done at the international level. The process is that the standard is developed through various stages. There is an initial stage, a working document is made, then a preparatory or the participatory, or you can say for the circulation of the members, P draft is made, and then a wide circulation draft is made, which is sent for open comments. The comments are received, they are discussed, and ISO, it is voting. Through the voting, each country has one vote. You can say either you can agree with this, you can disagree with this, or you can abstain. If you are disagreeing, you have to give the justification for that. Why do you disagree with the standard given at the international level at various stages? So at the national level, when these documents are received, the concerned NMC or the National Mirror Committee circulates among its own members, get their viewpoint, then make a national stand. What should be our stand for this international standard based on the discussion held in the corresponding national committee? So once that is done, then the views are given, the approval or disapproval or abstention is given. If we are not into a particular field at the moment, our country is not working in that, we can also go for abstention. But if you are giving a negative comment, you have to give your justification also. So that is how the certification, how the standards are developed. It's a long-term process. It may take around 3 years time. 36 months is the normal time given for development of the ISO standards. So since you have to take into consideration the consensus of various countries, which in turn get the viewpoint of the various stakeholders in the country. So it's a long drawn process and it takes a lot of time. And it is after a lot of deliberations that these standards are finalized. So BIS also sends its representatives drawn from the industry and other stakeholders who represent the country and participate in these meetings at the international level when the standards are being made. So this committees meetings are held at different places in the world, and sometimes BIS, helps financially also for participation of the experts in the ISO meetings. So that is how the standards are made, by participation of the various experts through the national bodies. Then ISO has published more than 25,615 standards, and then it is covering around 841 technical committees and subcommittees. Similarly, the IEC is there. There are 173 countries, more than 10,000 standards, more than 1 million certificates, and more than 30,000 experts are involved. Now, see, the difference is ISO, it does not on its do any certification. The ISO does not do any certification. All that ISO 9000 certification that you see in the market, it is not done by ISO. It is done by the certification bodies. The way we have NABL and accreditation bodies, similarly, we have many certification bodies in the market who do the certification, but they have to comply with the requirements of another standard. So on their own, directly, ISO does not do any certification, whereas the IEC does some certification. There are 4 schemes operated by the IEC. These are the conformity assessment systems of IEC. IEC EE is the IEC system of conformity assessment schemes for electrotechnical equipment and components. Then IEC RE, the system of certification to standards relating to equipment for use in renewable energy application. IEC EX, it is relating to the equipment for use in explosive atmospheres, and IEC Q, which is assessment for electronic components. So these are the different CST schemes being operated by IEC. Now our standard ISO IEC 17025, it is the general requirements for the competence of testing and calibration laboratories. It is the international reference for testing and calibration laboratories who want to demonstrate their capacity to deliver reliable results. So it covers the basic 3 things, 3 pillars that we discussed. What were these? We discussed 3 pillars under this standard, which the lab have to comply also otherwise. What were these?
Competency, impartiality.
Yes. Competency, impartiality,
consistency,
and consistency of operations, right? So this standard covers these 3 things. Now this standard was first published in 1999 and subsequently revised in 2005, and it was again revised in 2017. Now here, let me tell you, all these standards which are made, be it at national level or international level, all these standards are by default reviewed every 5 years. Okay, even the national standards, when they are made, they are reviewed every 5 years. They are reviewed for what? After the review, what can be done? What can be the outcome of the review? These standards are reviewed with an aim to see whether they are still relevant, if any changes are required in the standards. If the changes are required, these are minor changes or major changes, or they are become obsolete, redundant. So these kind of things are done when the standards are reviewed. If on reviewal, it is found that there is no change required in the standard, the standard is reaffirmed that no change is required, and the year also will remain the same. Right. So one is reaffirmation that no change is required. If small changes are required, there is an amendment issued to the standard. And in case major changes are required, the standards are revised. So our standard was last revised in 2017. The fourth scenario is that the standard may be withdrawn, cancelled. It can be a scenario where it is felt that the standard is no more relevant. It is redundant. Can you think of a scenario where the standard becomes redundant? Any example? Any example where you feel the standard has become redundant and needs to be withdrawn?
If any standard has been designed based on the specific climate or a specific atmosphere with the some certain conditions, and after some time of period, if it has some changes, so that can be withdrawn.
No, that can be amended, that can be revised. You know, to change the conditions, if there is a change required in the standard, it needs to be amended or revised.
Okay, in some standard, if we are using some mechanism which now at present has been obsolete or something happened, in
Correct.
that case we need.
Correct. The technology has become obsolete.
Right, sir. Okay, sir.
Right. Now, see the example of some pesticides which have been banned for many, many years now. Right. The many pesticides.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So it has become redundant now. They cannot be produced in the country. Right. They cannot be used in the country. So there's no point in having the standards continuing. So we withdraw the standards.
Correct.
Though earlier I used to give the example of pagers, which I am presently afraid whether I should be giving the example of the pagers being redundant in view of the recent, the blasts of pagers that we have seen, right, in Lebanon.
Yes.
Yes.
Earlier we were thinking that pager is an example and we can withdraw the, the standard on pagers because it is not being used.
Maybe we can say telegram. Now
Sorry?
we are not using the telegram.
Yeah, but these pages, they're still being used. We recently seen they are being used.
For some certain activities.
Yeah, but they are in use now. Right. So we cannot say it is totally obsolete, but in our country we had thought that it is obsolete and the standard could be withdrawn. So that were some examples where we feel that the technology has become obsolete and we can withdraw the standard. So in our case, the standard was last revised in 2017. Now, let us see why this standard. Now, yes, this new standard was published by ISO and IEC. Now, the question Mr. Ashish was asking, why there is ISO and IEC. Now, please see. I told you in the beginning that ISO is responsible for making standards in every field except electrical and electronics. But where the field is common, right? Then the ISO and the IEC, they come together and make the standard. In the field of conformity assessment, there is a separate committee which is responsible for making the standards. It is called the CASCO, Conformity Assessment Committee. CASCO, C-A-S-C-O, Conformity Assessment Committee. So this is the committee which made this standard. And for this purpose, the ISO and IEC, they came together. And that is why this standard is called the ISO/IEC. Right? They had come together. Now you see this lab standard, it is not applicable to only the chemical, mechanical, civil labs. It is applicable equally for electrical labs also and electronics lab also. Right? So it is not restricted to the scope of the ISO or the IEC alone. It is applicable for across the board for all disciplines, isn't it? So in this case, they collaborated. The ISO and IEC, they collaborated and then they have jointly come out with this standard. That means the owners of these standards are both jointly held, ISO and IEC. That is why this prefix is there, ISO/IEC. Mr. Ashish, is that does that answer your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right, fine. So a new version of the standard, that means 2017 version, was published to update the contents and to better serve the labs who are using it. This was developed by lab experts. As I told you, the different experts, stakeholders that they have brought together, along with 18 liaison organizations. ILAC was also a part of it, and many other associations who are representing labs. They were brought on board. They were involved in the development of this standard. Now, what are the benefits of this standard? This standard enables the labs to demonstrate these three things, which we have been discussing repeatedly. Three things: that they are able to generate valid results, which in turn promotes confidence in their work, both at the national as well as the international level. It also helps facilitate cooperation between labs and other bodies by generating wider acceptance of results between the countries. It can be done, right? If they are following this and they have been accredited, then it helps. There's a basic common criteria for the labs. So it can be considered that they are producing equivalent results. So their results can be accepted once they are accredited. Then test reports and certificates can be accepted from one country to another without the need for further testing, which in turn improves the international trade. Then this standard requires the lab to plan and implement actions to address risk and opportunities. Now, what is that? This standard wants you means whosoever is implementing this, to do one thing. To comply with the standards, implement the standard, you have to do one thing. It's a prerequisite that you must assess the risks and opportunities related to your activity. Now, broadly, your activity is, for example, sampling, receipt of samples, testing, issue of test reports, right? Maintaining the sample as long as it is under test. All these things are your activities, broad activities. So you are required to identify what are the risks.
वो भी एग्री कर रहा है।
हाँ जी मैम।
तो फिर एक काम करते हैं आशुतोष, एक काम
Kindly
करते हैं
mute. Kindly mute yourself. Kindly mute.
this parameter will remove.
Madam, please mute.
दीक्षा हम आशुतोष से डिस्कस करके ही मैंने
Ashutosh ji, please mute yourself. Okay. So you are expected to plan and implement actions to address the risks and opportunities. That means first you have to identify what are the risks related to each of your activity, do the risk analysis, and then come up with an action plan to address that risk. It is a form of the preventive action. Earlier in the standard, we were using the word preventive action. Now in all the management system standards, the approach has been changed to risk-based thinking or the risk-based approach. Herein, the organization who is implementing the various management system standards, they are required to proactively identify the risk associated with various activities, do the analysis of these risks, how severe these risks are, what is the probability of this risk happening, and what is the severity of this risk if this happens. Based on that, you are required to do some indexing, and based on that indexing, you have to identify whether it's a risk which can have effect on you, or it can be ignored, and how serious or critical it is. So according to that, you have to come out with an action plan to handle the risks. Okay, so this standard requires us to plan and implement the actions to address the risks and opportunities. Once it is done, see, if we are proactively identifying the risk, that means we are doing proactively the preventive action. We are visualizing that what type of problems can come in my various activities. I try to focus on that, try to handle them beforehand, right? And then take action so that it doesn't happen. So if it is implemented, this will help me in increasing the effectiveness of the management system and achieve the improved results and prevent the negative results, negative effects if I'm doing the risk and opportunities analysis. Now, who is this standard for? This standard is useful for any organization which performs testing or calibration or sampling and testing or sampling and calibration and wants reliable results. So it can be only testing, it can be sampling and testing, it can be calibration, or it can be sampling and calibration. Sampling alone is not covered under this standard. If any organization is doing only sampling, okay. JRG is asking what kind of test risks are involved with testing. We will discuss that. Let us come to the standard. Broadly at this moment, testing. See, your equipment is not calibrated. Is that a risk which can affect your results? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Your person is not trained to carry out the testing. Is this a risk or not?
Yes, sir.
Right. The accuracy of your equipment is not as per the requirement. Is it a risk or not that you will be giving faulty results?
Yes, sir.
Your CRM that you're using is out of date. Is it a risk or not?
Yes, sir.
Right. So you can also think of various other risks associated with your activities. These are some of the examples related to the risks. Okay. So that is what you are required to do at the we are having a separate lecture on the risk analysis also, right? So we'll discuss how to handle the risks, how to identify the risks, how to do the indexing of the risk, and how to come up with the action plans for the risks. That also we'll be discussing. Okay. Now this standard is applicable for any organization who is carrying out three types of activities, either testing or calibration, testing and calibration, or sampling and testing, or sampling and calibration. 4 of them. Okay. Now, many times client does the sampling is not acceptable as this. Yes, it is acceptable. Ashish is asking question, if the sampling is done not by me, the customer gives the sample to me, yes, and how it is to be addressed, we'll discuss in detail. In such cases, how to do, what to do. Okay. Because then I am not aware how the sampling was done. My job responsibility is restricted to the carrying out of the testing. So I do not know what sample it is. Whatever the customer is saying, I'm believing that I'm doing the testing. So same thing we have to mention in our test report. We have to give a disclaimer that the testing is based on the sample provided by the customer. Whatever he is saying, you have to do that. You have to, based on that, you are giving the results. So you have to give a disclaimer in the test report. Okay. Now, so this standard is also applicable for all type of laboratories, whether they be owned and operated by the government, by the industry, or in fact any organization, any lab, it is applicable. It is also useful to universities, research centers, governments, regulators, inspection bodies, product certification organizations, and other conformity bodies who have the need to do testing, sampling, or calibration. Okay, so it is applicable across the board, irrespective of the size of the lab, the number of the persons involved, right? That is there, it is applicable. Rupesh ji, please mute. Kindly mute Rupesh ji. Thank you. Now, why was this standard revised? I told you this was revised in 2017. The earlier version was 2005, first made 1999, first revision 2005, second revision 2017. And the current version is 2017. Why was it revised? Because after 2005, the market conditions had changed, technology had changed. We had started using a lot of IT. In our testing now, we are using a lot of IT. We are generating reports online, isn't it? We are monitoring the samples online. We are using, many of us are using LIMS, Lab Information Management System. I hope you are using, many of you might be using LIMS. Are you people using LIMS or not? LIMS.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yes or no?
No, sir.
No,
No,
sir.
sir.
No.
Okay. There are the softwares available which are being used. LAMS, the Lab Information Management System is being used, whereby you are generating test reports also online. We are, issuing the reports online like that. So a lot of IT is being used now in the testing also. So the new version covers technical changes, vocabulary, and developments in the IT techniques. It also takes into consideration the latest version of 9001. See, this is a quality management system, lab quality management. The basic standard in the management system is 9001. And all the related standards of the management system, they are now aligned with each other. The basic structure of all the standards after 2015, they have been aligned. Now, presently, you will see 9001, 14,000, 22,000, etc., etc. Every standard, there are broadly, they are same. The broad context is the same. The structure of these standards is the same. So they have been aligned. In our case, it is slightly different, but otherwise others are aligned. So our standard efforts have been made in our standard also to align it with the changes being made in 9001 in 2015. So they have also been incorporated. So what are the major changes in the present standard? It takes into consideration the new ways of working. The most substantive changes are the scope has been revised to cover all lab activities, including testing, calibration, and the sampling associated with subsequent calibration and testing. I told you this. So now it is called the range of activity. It was scope, now it is called the range of activities that is being covered. It has been, accordingly modified. Then the new structure has been adopted to align with the other existing ISO or IEC conformity assessment standards as per the 17,000 series, as I told you. Now there is a process approach we'll discuss subsequently. Process approach is, in nutshell, that every activity in your organization you take as a process. Sampling as a process, receipt of samples as a process, testing as a process, issue of reports as a process. So this is the process approach. And then we'll discuss in detail subsequently. At this moment, understand that the process approach is now as per the revised 9000 standards, and the emphasis is on the results. It's more result oriented rather than descriptive. There is no detailed description of the task and steps, only the results are being now emphasized. So it has a stronger information technology focus. It incorporates the use of computer systems, electronic records, and the production of electronic results and reports also. Okay. Then a new section has been introduced to the risk-based thinking, right, and describes the commonalities with the new standard. As I told you briefly that this is the new approach, risk-based thinking. Then terminology has been updated. There is a international vocabulary of metrology. Along with that, it has been aligned, and then ISO IEC terminology has also been aligned. Common terms have been included related to the conformity assessment, in line with the other international standards. Then earlier we were having the preventive action, which has been removed. Now, as I said, instead of the preventive action, we are going for the risk-based approach, risk-based thinking. So earlier there was a specific requirement of having a quality manager and technical manager. Now this terminology of having quality manager or technical manager has been removed. It is not necessary as per the standard to nominate somebody as a quality manager or technical manager. You can still do it, but earlier it was a part of the standard. Now it is not. Only thing is the responsibilities of the quality manager and the technical managers, they need to be delegated to somebody. That somebody may be named like anything. You need not necessarily call him quality manager or technical manager as per this standard now. Okay. Now a definition of the laboratory has been added, which was not there earlier. And then there is some improvement in the impartiality and conformity. Then the word range of lab activities has been included, not just the scope of testing implementation. Then there is a class related to controlling the facilities and environmental conditions outside the permanent control. We'll discuss in detail when we go. It is not restricted to the activity that you are doing in your permanent premises. If you are going to the customer's place, at times you have to go to the customer's place and do the testing because the samples cannot be moved from there. So you have to go there and do the testing, or you have a mobile lab where you do the testing. In such cases also, the responsibility to ensure the environmental conditions and to control the facilities lies with you. That has also been included in the standard now. Now, externally provided products and services, for that also there has been certain changes which we'll be discussing. Then there is a requirement for the lab to be aware of latest industry standards and methods. It is now your responsibility as a lab to see to be of the latest test methods, updated methods. You have to be aware what are the latest test methods in this particular field, particular requirement, and you are also expected to bring it to the notice of your customer. If he is mentioning something different, you have to discuss with him. Then you have to mandatorily evaluate and report measurement uncertainty. If you are applying for NABL, in your application also, you are required to mention the measurement uncertainty. Then new methods for ensuring the validation of the results. Whatever testing we are doing, are we getting the correct results or not? Are our results validated or not? How do we validate our results? We'll be discussing under 7.7. Some new requirements, methods of validation have also been incorporated. Then there are certain improvements in the classes relating to complaints handling of non-conforming work, and the control of.
Sir, I have a question.
Yes, please.
Sir, if we are reporting qualitative result, then it is mandatory also to report a measurement of uncertainty
No.
because we are giving qualitative result only.
No, for subjective requirements or the qualitative, it is not.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, sir.
So friends, based on these are the basic changes which are there in the standard, right? And based on that, the present structure of the standard is this. Our standard 1705 now covers these things. There is a foreword, which is there in every standard that you see. There is an introduction class, every standard must have. Then the scope of the standard, what is covered in the standard. What are the references which are integral part of these for implementation, understanding of the standard, normative references. Terms and definitions, what are the general terms and definitions which have a direct relevance here in the standard, in the implementation of the standard, they are covered. So from 4 starts the operative clauses. 4 is general requirements, 5 is structural requirements, 6 is resource requirements, process requirements, then management requirements. There are 2 options in the management requirements, we will discuss that. Then there is an annexure A giving some details about traceability, and then annexure B detailing about the management system options, and then there is a bibliography. The reference is available, right? That is what is given. That is what the structure is. Now you see this structure, it's a very systematic thing. When you start the work on a lab and then you do the operation, it is, stepwise things have been covered in this. In management system, we talk of a terminology which is called the PDCA. Have you heard of it? PDCA.
Yes, sir.
What is
Plan, do,
that?
check, act.
Sorry?
Plan, do,
Plan,
check,
do,
act.
check, act.
Plan, do, check and act. Correct. So in management system, we talk of this. PDCA is applicable in our day-to-day life also for everything. We'll cover slightly also in future, in the subsequent program also. PDCA is plan, do, check and act. So you do the planning, right? You implement, check, verify how far your plan was. Then what are the deviations? You check, right? Plan, do. Plan, do means implementation part, implement the plan. Check is see, evaluate how far your plan has been implemented, any problems in that, right? Then you do the checking. Based on that checking, you act, you improve, you make the changes that are required in this. So in this also, we are going according to that. PDCA is being followed here. See, I'm planning, I'm setting up a lab. What shall be there in my lab? We are covering under general requirements. What shall my lab have? My lab should be working with confidentiality and impartiality. Then structure. What shall be the structure of my lab? Right? What shall be the roles and responsibilities of various people in the lab? And then what shall be the resources? For operating the lab, what kind of resources are required? So we identify that. We are doing the planning part, right? So general requirements is confidentiality, impartiality, structural is the role responsibility, right? The organization structure, interrelationship, and then the resource, equipment, facilities, right? Manpower, all these things are the resources. So how do we handle the resource? This is the planning part. Then we implement, we do the actual process. The actual testing comes into play, the process requirements. So what are the requirements while doing the testing or calibration? So that is covered under the process part. So that is the D part, right? Then comes the C&A. Check part is done under 8, clause number 8. Check part is through the, the internal audit. Through the internal audit, we do the check part. We see how far everything has gone, how are the activities done. Are they going as per the plan or not? If any changes are required, we bring it to the top management. So management review meeting is done to act on the results of the internal audit or other audit or other inputs. So they are discussed in the management review meeting and the act part is done. So any changes required in the plan, etc., they are incorporated. So the whole standard is based on the PDCA cycle. Plan, do, check and act. Okay. So friends, we'll be covering now one by one the standard. First thing is forward. In the forward of the standard, the process of development of standard has been covered. And then process means that this has been developed jointly under the CASCO by ISO and IEC. It has been indicated in the forward of the standard. Then main changes compared to the previous edition, they have been highlighted. We have just discussed that also. What are the main changes? Then in the introduction class, the objective of the development of the standard, it has been covered. What is that objective? Objective is to promote confidence in the operation of the lab, to show that lab is able to do these three things: credibility of the results, that means it is competent, right? Working in an impartial manner, and then working consistently in a consistent manner, right? That is the objective of development of the standard. Then requirement for the lab, implementing the standard. What is the lab? What is the standard expecting from the lab? We just discussed. It wants the lab to do the risk analysis, right? That is covered. And then what are the benefits of the standard? We have been discussing so far. What are the benefits? One standard, tested once, things like that. We have discussed that. So these are all the benefits of the standard, which is also discussed in the introduction. Now, there are different verbal forms in use, which are used in various standards. All the standards, these 4 verbal forms are used. So these are shall, should, may, or can. Now for all purposes, please remember, wherever the word shall is coming, it is the requirement of the standard. It is a mandatory requirement of the standard. You have to do that if you're implementing the standard. If the standard says that the lab shall have a procedure, that means you're mandatorily required to have the procedure. The lab shall maintain records. So you are mandatorily required to maintain the records. The lab shall retain records. Lab shall have a document. There are 4 things we'll be discussing: document, procedure, records, and retain records. What are these? We'll discuss subsequently. So point here is wherever the word shall is coming, it is mandatory. The others are should is for recommendation, may is for indicates a permission, and can indicates a possibility or capability, or this can also be done like this. But wherever it is shall, you have to comply. So please underline the word shall. Where the shall is coming, it is mandatory. Now there was a question about the ISO IEC being there. Now, please remember, every standard that you see that you implement, be it the national or the international standard, there are three components. There is a prefix, there is a number, there is a year. The prefix denotes the ownership of the standard. In this case, it is ISO/IEC, and that means the ownership of the standard lies both with ISO and IEC. The number, it is a unique identity for the subject. For that subject, that particular number always will remain the same. Whereas the third component is the year in which this was last, it was published or last updated. Okay, these are the three components. Now, generally, the number is a serial number. Generally, the number is a serial number which is coming in the order of preparation of the standard. But many times the organizations, in order to highlight the important standards, give it a number which is out of the serial. Now, for example, I told you that ISO has made around 25,000 standards. So there should be a series. I mean, serially, the standard number should not be more than 25,000. But we have standards like Information Security Management System, 27,000. Artificial Intelligence Management System, 42,000. Occupational Health and Safety, 45,000. So this is to highlight the importance of a standard. Additionally, in certain cases, now you will see ISO 9000 series of standards. So 9000, 9001, 9002, like that. So it is a series given to a particular group of standards. Similarly, the 17,000 series of the ISO IEC standards, they are given to standards related to conformity assessment. We had seen the reference to standards 17,000, 17,010, 17,011, 17,020, ours is 17,025, like that. So these are the standards related to a series, which is the conformity assessment series. So otherwise, generally it's a serial number. So in different cases, it is done like that. Now, another thing is, I told you that there are 172 members who are the members of the ISO. So the members of the ISO and the IEC, they have a privilege to adopt these standards, the ISO or IEC standards, as their national standards if they want to adopt them as such without making any changes. So they are adoption of the international standards. So if a country decides to adopt that standard as their own standard, as their own national standard, they are allowed to prefix their name also in the standard. So in our case, this 17025 has been adopted by BIS as the national standard without any changes. So now this standard is called IS/ISO/IEC 17025/2017. IS/ISO. IS means the Indian standard. IS/ISO/IEC 17025/2017. That is the number of the standard now in India. What are the benefits of that? One benefit is that now this is available in the country. One is that the benchmarking is done. We are benchmarking our standards as per the international standards, and it is visible also that we have followed the international standard. Second is now this standard now can be sold in India as an Indian standard also, right? So the cost substantially comes down because we are selling in Indian rupees, whereas the ISO or the IEC sells it in the USD, the dollars. So the cost substantially comes down. Though BIS has made all its own indigenous standards, that means the standards which are developed by ISO, by BIS, with the prefix IS, they are now freely downloadable. You can download all of these standards as free, but the adopted standards, they cannot be given to you for free because there is a royalty issue involved with the ISO and IC. So, but they are sold at a very substantially low price. So these are the benefits. So our standard is now IS/ISO/IC 1705 2017. Same standard, no change, word to word, same standard. There is a national forward given at the beginning just to tell that this has been adopted. Otherwise, no changes. Okay. Mr. Ashish, I think this supplements to your question. You are asking about ISO/IC. I'm saying IS/ISO/IC.
Yes, sir. Got it.
Right. So, friends,
Sir, one question, but in case of suppose like ISO, IC makes some changes in the subsequent years after 5 years. So IS also needs to be taken into account and needs to be revised.
yes, if we are adopted the international standard, we also change. We adopt the new standard. Okay. Then only we'll be in line. So we have to do that simultaneously. So with that, we come to the end of this presentation also. Okay. So now we come to the main classes of the standard. Let me share the next presentation. One second. Okay, it is visible on your screens.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Now, before I start this, just a small question. What time would you like to have your lunch break? It is 1 or 1:30.
Sir, keep it at 1:30.
Okay.
1:30.
Is it okay for others?
It's okay, sir.
Perfect.
Okay, sir, no issues. Go for 1:30.
Because you are working from your offices, some of you might be. So we'll try to align with that. 1:30 is okay with you?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right, friends. So we'll take a break for lunch at 1:30. Fine. So any questions other than whatever we asked? Any other questions at this moment for whatever we have discussed in the earlier two sessions?
Sir, one clarification. What is the difference between the scope and range?
Scope and range. Scope was only specific. We are saying testing and calibration. The word has been now enlarged to cover the range. That means all the activities that are there. Now the word being used instead of the scope is the range. So it is covering both testing, calibration, and sampling and testing, as I said, are sampling and calibration also. It's a change of the word only. From instead of scope, it is now range of activities.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Right. Okay. So we had seen that this is the structure of the standard, right? We've seen that the clauses are the scope, the normative references, terms and definitions, General requirements covering impartiality and confidentiality, structural requirements, and the resource requirements. We'll be covering up to resource requirements today. It's class number 6. So 6.1 will be general, 6.2 talks about the personnel, 6.3 about the facilities and environmental conditions, 4 about the equipment, 5 about the meteorological traceability, and 6 about the externally provided products and services. Sorry. Now the scope. Let us start with class number 1. This document, whereas the word like this document is coming, that means this standard. Okay. Wherever you are seeing this document, that means this standard. Now this standard specifies the general requirements for the competence, impartiality, and consistent operation of laboratories. We have been discussing this for long, right? Now then this standard is applicable to all the organizations who are performing lab activities, regardless of the number of personnel or the size of the organization. It can be very small organization, it can be very large organization. It can be a government organization, it can be an industry lab, it can be university lab, it can be any lab. It is applicable for all organizations who are performing lab activities, regardless of the number of personnel. And it is used by lab customers, regulatory authorities, organizations, and schemes who are using peer assessment, accreditation bodies also, and others use this document in confirming or recognizing the competence of laboratories. So the regulator also sees, okay, if you are complying, if you are accredited, that means you are meeting the requirements, right? So they can be used by different bodies also. That is the scope. So the primarily scope covers the requirements for competence, impartiality, and consistency of operations. Okay. Second is the normative references. The normative references means those standards, those references which form an integral part, which are referred and which can be, whose things are used in the standard. They form an integral part while implementing this standard. Now there are 2 references given: ISO IEC Guide 99, which is International Vocabulary of Metrology, basic and general concepts and associated terms, and then ISO IEC 17000, which is conformity assessment, vocabulary, and general principles. Now, please see here, we had seen that for every standard there are how many components? There were 3 components we had talked about: a prefix, a number, and the year. Isn't it? When you are talking about a standard number, it consists of 3 things: a prefix, a number, and the year.
Yes, sir.
In this case, in both the cases, it is consisting of only 2 components. The third component about the date is not there. So when the date is not there, the reference is called undated reference. When the date is there, it is called the dated reference. When the date is not there, it is called the undated reference. What is the difference between the 2?
Undated means whatever the recent revision that we have to accompany.
Good,
That is
very
undated.
good. And dated?
Whatever the dated, that only we have to consider.
Correct. Very good. So for dated references, only the cited edition applies. If says 2017, that means we're talking about only that version, that particular edition only. Whereas if it is undated, right, it means the latest edition of the reference document or the standard, including whatever amendments are there, that is applicable. If it is an undated reference, it means the latest version by default will be applicable. If it is dated, that particular cited edition is applicable. That is the difference between the dated and undated references. So in our case, these both are undated references. That means if we are referring, we'll have to refer to the latest version of the given standard. Okay. Then we have terms and definitions. There are 9 terms or definitions covered here under class number 3, which are applicable for better understanding, better implementation of this standard. In addition, there are 2 links which you can refer for any definition related to these terminologies and definitions that you require related to the ISO or IEC. One is the www.iso.org/OBP online browsing portal. So www.iso.org/OBP online browsing portal. You can refer that. And for definitions related to IEC, you can refer to www.electropedia, electropedia.org. So this will also give you the basic definitions in general related to all conformity assessment and others standardization related definitions. They are available on these 2 websites links. Okay, so in this standard, there are 9 definitions covered. First one is impartiality. What do you understand by impartiality? It is presence of objectivity, or you can also say absence of subjectivity. Right? There is no subjectivity. It is clear. It is impartial, and it is presence of objectivity. So objectivity means that conflict of interest do not exist, or if in any case there was any conflict of interest, they have been resolved in such a manner that they will not adversely influence the subsequent activities of the laboratory. That is the definition of impartiality. So it can also be called freedom from conflict of interest because there is no conflict of interest. So impartiality can also be called as freedom from conflict of interest, freedom from bias, lack of prejudice, neutrality, right? Fairness, open-mindedness, even-handedness, detachment, or balance. So the meaning is clear. It is presence of objectivity or absence of subjectivity primarily. Now 3.2 talks about complaint. Okay, when does one complains to you or related to your activities? When the person is not satisfied. So by definition, the complaint is expression of dissatisfaction by any person or organization relating to the activities or results of that laboratory where a response is expected. So the complaint is expression of dissatisfaction relating to the activities. Then comes the inter-lab comparison. When you are organizing, performing and evaluating the measurements or carrying out the tests on the same or similar items by 2 or more laboratories in accordance with predetermined conditions, that is called inter-lab comparison. Right? When you are organizing, performing and evaluating measurements or doing the testing on same or similar items by 2 or more different laboratories in accordance with predetermined conditions, it is called inter-lab because it is between 2 or more labs. It is inter-lab. So if the similar thing is done within the same lab, it is called the intra-lab comparison. So the organization, performance and evaluation of measurements or tests on the same or similar items within the same laboratory in accordance with predetermined conditions, method conditions, atmospheric conditions, all these things are defined, method procedure is defined, and then you do the comparison within the same lab, it is intra-lab, within different labs, it is inter-lab comparison. The next term is about the proficiency testing. When you are evaluating the performance of the participant against a pre-established criteria by means of inter-lab comparison. Based on these inter-lab comparisons, if you are evaluating the performance of the participants based on some pre-established criteria. It is called the proficiency testing, right? So proficiency testing is nothing but evaluation of the participants' performance by means of interlab comparisons. Then 3.6 talks about the definition of the laboratory. Please confirm I am audible.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay. So lab is what? Nothing but a body which performs one or more of the following activities. What are these activities? We have discussed the calibration, testing, or sampling associated with subsequent calibration or testing. I'm repeating, if the lab is doing only sampling and not doing any testing or calibration, it is not covered under the scope of the standard. It has to be sampling followed by calibration or followed by testing. Then comes a very important new definition, which is decision rule. ILC comparison, 2 lab is sufficient? No. Somebody asked me a question, is 2 labs sufficient? Actually, no. Generally 5 to 6 labs are required for interlab comparison. Okay, so now we come to the definition of decision rule. Rule that describes how measurement uncertainty will be accounted for when stating conformity with a specified requirement. Okay, if we don't have the similar labs for ILT, there is a provision. We'll discuss that. There is an NABL document which tells us how to handle such situations when the ILT labs are not available. Similar kind of testing is available that can be considered. So there are certain rules which are applicable in the different NABL documents. We can discuss that further. Okay, we'll refer to that subsequently. Here we are discussing the definitions only. Please remember we're discussing definitions. Now, see, when you are doing the testing, there are 2 kinds of situations. One, you are reporting results without giving whether the sample is pass or fail. When you are mentioning based on the test reports and the specification whether the sample is conforming or not conforming. It is pass or fail. It is meeting the requirements or not meeting the requirements. That is called the statement of conformity. Okay, so Geetaji, we will discuss measurement of uncertainty. There is total class on that. Okay, we'll discuss, but briefly, measurement uncertainty I'll tell you briefly here, but we'll discuss in detail subsequently. Here we're discussing only the definition. I'll explain that also. Okay, so there are 2 situations. One, you're reporting the results only, no issue, no problem. Second is, you are now reporting whether the sample is pass or fail, it is conforming or not conforming. That means you are giving a statement of conformity. Right. Now, please see, whenever we are doing a testing, there is always some error possible. What are the different kind of errors?
Human error.
Yes, sir.
Type B.
Human error and equipment.
Right. Right. System errors and random errors.
Yes, sir, random.
Right. Broadly, these are system errors and random errors. Right. So whatever testing we are doing, there is bound to be certain kind of uncertainty about the results, because there can always be errors. There are bound to be errors. For each method, there are different steps involved, different equipment involved, which contribute to this uncertainty, which contribute to the errors. Right? So these errors together, they constitute the uncertainty which is there in measurement. While you are making the measurements, doing the testing, there are bound to be certain errors, as we discussed, random or systematic errors. So these Errors contribute to the uncertainty of the measurement. This is called the measurement uncertainty. We'll be discussing under class number 7 also on this. 7.6 will be discussing about the measurement uncertainty in detail.
Okay, sir.
Right. Here, as I said earlier, we're discussing only the definitions. Now, point is, I told you that two situations. You either give the reports, the results only of the testing, or you give a statement of conformity as per the agreement with your customer. That you have to mention pass fail also. If you're mentioning pass fail, that means you're giving a statement of conformity. In that case, how will you incorporate this measurement uncertainty in your results, in your statement of conformity? Whether the sample is pass or fail, when you're saying this, how will you take care of this measurement uncertainty into your final statement of conformity? That rule is called the decision rule. So the rule that describes how this measurement uncertainty will be accounted for when we are stating the conformity with the given set of requirements is called the decision rule. Is that clear? What is decision rule is clear?
Clear.
Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Sorry. One second, sorry. Okay. So the rule which describes how the measurement uncertainty will be accounted for when we are giving the statement of conformity with a specified requirement is called the decision rule. That was the definition number 7. So the 8th is verification. Provision of objective evidence that a given item fulfills the specified requirements is verification. Now, whether these specified requirements, they are adequate for the intended use or not, is called the validation. Is that clear? Is the definition clear? See, verification is you only trying to see whether yes, it is meeting the requirements or not. We are verifying yes, it is meeting the requirements. But then whether these requirements are okay for the intended purpose or not, is it fulfilling the intended purpose or not, is called the validation. Okay. Now I have a method. Now, for example, I have a method for determination of concentration of nitrogen in water. I have a method. Now, I use the same method for determination of concentration of nitrogen in, say, human serum. Not in water, in human serum. The same method. I am following the method. I am verifying that every step that is given, I am following. The test method, procedure, I am following verbatim. So it is verification. I am fulfilling the requirements of the standard, the method. But now whether this method is actually appropriate for finding out the nitrogen in human serum or not, I do not know. So I need to validate that. I need to validate that this method is serving the intended purpose or not. That is validation. Let's take another example. We write the code for say virus, in the computers. We follow the code, we verifying it is done perfectly as the way it was written. But then whether it is able to control the virus or not, that needs to be checked. So it is validation. We have people from food also. We are aware of pasteurization. What is pasteurization?
Sir, we heat the milk for high temperature, then suddenly we cool down it in lower temperature. Then we follow the process 1 to 2 times. Then the milk will stay free from microorganisms, germs. It kills
Right.
germs.
What is the purpose of this
For
pasteurization?
enhance the life of the milk.
How?
What?
How does
By
it
killing-
increase the life?
By killing the germs which deteriorate the quality of the milk.
Correct. Because it is reducing the bacterial load,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Yes.
It is expected to decrease the bacterial load of the milk, or it can be juices also, it can be anything, right? Now we have defined that we will do the pasteurization at 72 plus minus 2 or 78 plus minus 2 and cool it to 4 degree, right? Now we follow that. We see, yes, the temperature of 78 plus minus 2 is being maintained. And then for cooling, 4 degrees maintained. That is verification. But then whether the actual purpose of the pasteurization, that is the reduction of the bacterial load, has this been achieved or not? We need to verify that. That verification is validation. Whether it is fulfilling the intended purpose or not. 9 definitions that we had, right? So we now, after that, we come to the operational classes. So these are the general classes, the scope, the references, and the terms and definitions. 9 definitions we have discussed. Then we'll come to the operative classes of the standard. We'll start with impartiality. Now, what is impartiality? We have discussed that. The opening class of the 4.1 subclass 411 says, important thing about the intent of the class is that the lab activities shall be undertaken impartially and structured and managed so as to safeguard impartiality. That means the lab shall be actually doing the work impartially. Not only that, its structure should be such that it supports impartiality, and it should be managed in such a manner that which supports impartiality, right? So it shall be undertaken impartially, structured and managed also in such a manner so as to safeguard the impartiality. Then the management commitment to partiality. The top management shall show commitment to impartiality. The lab shall not allow commercial, financial, or other pressures to compromise impartiality. Now you please tell me, all of you are working in the labs, what kind of pressures can be there which can compromise impartiality while working in the labs?
Sometimes
Financially.
time limits of testing. We have the fixed time.
Yeah, timing is there.
Number of samples testing increases in a time limit.
Right.
That sometimes create pressure.
They create pressure. No, but we are talking about the pressures which can affect the impartiality.
Sir, customer wants positive results.
Mhm.
So, would you say that if there is a lot of sort of a threatening thing to get the results,
Hmm.
then that can compromise the integrity or
Right.
impartiality.
Okay, good. And
Any kind of
Financial-
relation with the customer.
right,
Financial pressure.
financial pressure can be there. Financial pressure means what kind of pressure?
You want irregular test reports.
Hmm. Okay, and now,
Result adjustment pressure.
yeah, please.
Result adjustment pressure from plant.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So it can be something like a commercial pressure, financial pressure, or other pressures. Commercial pressure can be that the management is such which is, owning the manufacturing also, and which is having the production also, the testing also, production also and the testing also. Difficult for you to fail the samples. Okay, the directors of the two companies are common. Okay, the financial is somebody has, funded my company. The samples are coming from there to me. And there can be other financial kind of, I need not say that, other kind of financial pressures, right, which can affect the impartiality. Now, there can be other situations that I am working in the lab. My brother is working in the manufacturing unit from which the samples are coming to me. Right? Can that have an effect?
Yes. Conflict of interest.
Yeah, relationship is there. Right? And then these kind of situations should be handled by the organization in such a way, by having its structure in such a manner and management in such a manner that there is no interference and the adequate. Okay, first tell me, how will you take care of these things in your labs? How do you take care of these pressures? How do you counter these?
We don't deviate the standards.
No, that is a generic statement, but specific actions, how do you ensure that?
Production management must be different and quality management must be different.
Right. Okay, if you are a standalone lab,
By following the impartiality.
by following the impartiality means what? How do you follow? That is what I'm asking. How do you follow this?
So, blinded
Sir,
to the
actually,
samples.
that's why we need a management system. So by
Yes.
which we will avoid those type of aspects where known person avoid the known person for the testings, avoid that type of system. Suppose we have the manufacturing unit and we have the self-testing facility, then we will try to avoid all type of contacts which can
We
affect
follow
on
the coding system. We follow the coding
by
system,
opting
two
these
types
type
of
of
coding.
things.
Exactly. So the biggest checkpoint is your appropriate coding and decoding system. Masking the identity of the samples. Okay, if that is done diligently, then Jayaprakash ji is also saying taking the integrity pledge. Right? That is also legally binding method of doing it. So you have to do it in a legally binding method also. Take an undertaking from all your employees, so that it is structured or managed also in such a way so that the impartiality is ensured. Okay. Then another thing is we were just discussing about that the time frame part. Now suppose the lab insists or give say benefit or incentive to those people who give more number of testing, who give more testing, more results. Will you consider it as an compromise to impartiality, or otherwise do you
Yes,
consider
sir.
it as a risk?
Yes, sir,
Yes.
compromise.
Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yes, compromise.
I think it's a huge risk that we are taking because
No, but please
it can
see,
work both
if one
ways.
person is efficient,
It can work
will you take
both
it as a
ways.
risk?
Yes, sir.
It can work
Yes, sir.
both
It
ways.
create
It can
unnecessary
work
pressure
both
to
ways.
other employees.
Correct. It can work both ways. So you have to see that all the requirements of the method are being followed.
Yeah.
The testing is being done by following the total norms of the method, ensuring that test conditions, test, timing, everything. If it is to be done for 24 hours, it is done for 24 hours. He should not be giving a report in 20 hours like that. If it is ensured, then it is not a risk. So you have to be a balanced one.
Without compromising the standards.
Without compromising, correct. Without compromising impartiality. All right. So the lab shall identify the risks to the impartiality on an ongoing basis. That means it is not a one-time job. That you set up the lab, you identify it, and end of it. Not that, because it's an ongoing process. The people may keep on changing. The other circumstances may keep on changing. So you have to identify the risks on an ongoing basis. So that means you are required to keep a record of it. Although the standard is not saying anywhere that you shall keep record. I told you the word is shall. So it is not saying you shall keep records. But invariably, the auditors will ask
Excuse me, sir.
you. Yes.
We are following the online system for reporting the results, and we have all the data online. But we have to also follow the register.
No, not necessarily.
The records.
It can be no. It can be either form. But only thing is you have to ensure that even if you're doing online, the safety of the data is there. Impartiality and confidentiality of the data is maintained. It should not be accessible to everyone.
Okay.
Right? We'll be discussing in the next class about the confidentiality part also. So you have to maintain the confidentiality. We will also be discussing about the data safety part. Okay, so you have to ensure that whatever data is being generated, whatever test reports are being generated, the confidentiality is ensured. Okay, but you need not carry, you need not have the physical also. Okay, that is okay. That is acceptable. Okay. So you are required to identify the risk to impartiality on an ongoing basis, because the people may keep on changing, the equipment may keep on changing, other circumstances may keep on changing. So keep a record of your risk analysis, identification of the risk, and then the analysis of the risk, identification and analysis of the risk. Okay. So you have to do it on an ongoing basis, including those risks which arise from your activities, or from your relationship, or from relationship of your personal, relationship of the organization, or relationship of the person. We just discussed, I have a brother there or a sister there working in the other unit. So my relationship is there, or the relationship of the organization is there. I have a sister concern of other manufacturing unit. So you have to take care of all these things. Your system has to be such that it takes care of that, right? So however, such relationship do not necessarily present a lab with a risk of impartiality. We have taken adequate measures to ensure that there is no risk to impartiality. We are doing coding, right? We are ensuring there is adequate separation between the activities of the two organizations. I've taken a integrity pledge also from the persons, right? So these kind of steps we are taking to ensure that there is no conflict of interest. Then 415 says, if first thing is identification. Now, if the risk is identified, then in that case, the lab shall be able to demonstrate how these risks are eliminated or minimized. What is the action plan? You have to come out with the action plan. First is identification. Second is indexing. That means the severity and probability of that risk happening. Based on that, we do the indexing. And based on the index value, we define the action plan, right? Action plan to mitigate the risk, eliminate the risk, or minimize the risk. So we have to come out with an action plan also. So that is what is there in 4.1. So 4.2 talks about confidentiality. Now, the lab shall be responsible through legally enforceable commitments for the management of all information obtained or created during the performance of lab activities. The lab shall inform the customer in advance of the information it intends to place in public domain. मतलब क्या हुआ? Now it is the responsibility of the lab to ensure through legally enforceable commitment. मतलब एक आपने साइन लेना है, प्लेज लेनी है, जैसे बात करी प्लेज की, that you will maintain you have to take the undertaking from all the employees, that they will maintain the impartiality, they will maintain the confidentiality. That is a way of doing the legally enforceable commitment, right? So what is expected, that you will keep all the information which you receive from your client, or the information related to the client which is generated in your lab. That means the test results that are being generated. Both the things, the confidentiality has to be maintained, and that has to be done through legally enforceable commitments. And in case you want to put some information in your public domain, in your website, that these are my customers, these were the results I had done, things like that, you want to put some information into the public domain, you must inform the customer in advance that I intend to do this.
What do you mean by legally enforcement?
I told you, legally enforceable. You take an undertaking or a stamp paper from all your employees that you are bound legally.
So something like non-disclosure clause?
Sorry?
Something like non-disclosure clause?
Yes, something like non-disclosure. Are you like whosoever is joining in your joining letter, you have an undertaking that I will ensure confidentiality and impartiality.
Okay.
Right?
Understood.
Like that. So it is legally enforceable commitment. Now there can be situations when you are required by law. There is a court case going on. There is a inquiry by a government organization. Say CBI inquiry is going on. Something is happening against the client. In that case, you are bound to give the information, right? In that case, when the lab is required by law or authorized by contractual arrangements to release confidential information, in that case, the customer or the individual concerned shall, unless prohibited by law, be notified of the information provided. So ऐसे केसेस में जहाँ कोर्ट की रिक्वायरमेंट हो या किसी और लीगल रिक्वायरमेंट हो, जैसे मैंने बोला सीबीआई केस हो या ऐसा हो, वहाँ पे आपको क्लाइंट के बारे में इंफॉर्मेशन देनी ही पड़ती है, तो आपको ये कस्टमर को बताना पड़ेगा अनलेस इट इज बीन प्रोहिबिटेड बाय लॉ कि आप नहीं बता सकते, तो आपको इंफॉर्मेशन उसको बतानी है अपने कस्टमर को कि आप क्या इंफॉर्मेशन शेयर कर रहे हो. सो पहली चीज है कॉन्फिडेंशियल रखनी है, राइट? अगर पब्लिक डोमेन में डाल रहे हो तो उसको पहले एडवांस में बताना है, और अगर तीसरी चीज है अगर आपको बताना ही पड़ रहा है तो आप उसको इंफॉर्मेशन करोगे कि आई हैव टोल्ड टू द कंसर्न एजेंसीज अबाउट दिस अनलेस इट इज प्रोहिबिटेड बाय लॉ. Then information about the customer obtained from sources other than the customer. जैसे कोई कंप्लेंट आ गई आपके पास या रेगुलेटरी अथॉरिटी ने, से फूड सेफ्टी अथॉरिटी ने आपको अप्रोच किया, आपको इंफॉर्मेशन दी, भाई देखिए इसके बारे में कंप्लेंट है, तो वो जो इंफॉर्मेशन आपके पास आएगी, कंप्लेंट आती है, तो दैट शैल बी कॉन्फिडेंशियल बिटवीन यू एंड द लेबोरेटरी. आप उसको बता सकते हो कस्टमर को इसके बारे में कि ये इंफॉर्मेशन आपके बारे में आई है विदाउट टेलिंग द सोर्स. ओके, अनलेस एग्रीड बाय द सोर्स. अगर सोर्स कहता है ठीक है बता दो कोई बात नहीं है, यू कैन टेल, अदरवाइज यू आर required only to share the information and not the source. So the information about the customer obtained from sources other than the customer. Lunch break कर रहे हैं, बस ये 4.24 के बाद कर रहे हैं रुपेश जी, just 2 minutes. So information about the customer obtained from sources other than the customer, that is a complainant or the regulator. अगर आपके पास कोई information आती है, so that shall be confidential between the customer and the laboratory. The provider, that means the source of this information, shall be confidential to the lab and shall not be shared with the customer unless agreed by the source. Source अगर कह देता तो आप शेयर कर सकते हो, नहीं तो आपने शेयर नहीं करना. Information शेयर कर सकते हो, source शेयर नहीं करना. Then this confidentiality requirement is not only for your own employees, for everybody else, anybody else, जो भी आपके stakeholder हैं, जो बाहर के लोग भी आपकी लैब में आते हैं, आपको ये भी इंश्योर करता है कि वो भी कॉन्फिडेंशियलिटी मेंटेन करें. आपका कोई वेंडर आता है, वो देखता है आपकी टेस्टिंग चल रही है, उसके सामने इंफॉर्मेशन इस तरह से शेयर नहीं होनी चाहिए. सो यू हैव टू रिस्ट्रिक्ट दैट द पर्सनल, व्हाट आर द डॉक्यूमेंट्स वी रिटेन आर मेंटेन्ड. ओके, द पर्सनल इंक्लूडिंग एनी कमेटी मेंबर्स, contractors, personnel of external bodies or individuals acting on the lab's behalf shall keep confidential all information obtained and created during the performance of lab activity. So lab activity में आपके जो भी स्टेक होल्डर हैं, चाहे वो आपके वेंडर हैं, जो भी कोई और है, राइट, सभी को ये आपको आपने सभी से इंश्योर करना है कि कॉन्फिडेंशियलिटी अबाउट द इंफॉर्मेशन रिलेटेड टू कस्टमर इज मेंटेन. That is about this class. There was a question about what are the information we are required to maintain about 4.1 and 4.2. यही बोला था ना 4.12 बोला था क्या बोला था 421 था I just missed it. Please ask again. You are asking about which class? The question
The
was
same class only, 4.1 and 4.2 only, because the shell is in written so many times. So what are the documents we need to retain or maintain against these classes?
about the impartiality part.
Impartiality and confidentiality.
Yeah, I told you for impartiality.
Declaration we have to record and take signature of the employee, sir.
Yes, it is. It is required. You have to
Apart
keep
from
a
HR
record.
department, lab also we have to maintain the same data.
HR will have. Only thing is that it should be available with the organization as a lab. Okay, so it should be a part of your HR when you are, giving the appointment. It should be a part of that, or subsequently also you can get it done, but it shall be maintained with HR. It should be available. That's the thing. Okay, and then impartiality. We have seen that we have to do the risk analysis, come out with the action plan, indexing. These three things have to be maintained, right? And then legally maintainable, the undertaking part, it has to be there. Okay, so friends, with that, no, there are no formats. There are no formats for disclosure given in 17.5. It is generic because the activity changes from lab to lab. So it is a generic thing. It cannot be standardized. The formats are not standardized. So it is left to you. Only thing is this information should be available. So friends, with that, we come to the end of class number 4. We'll take a break here. So the time is 1:35. We meet at around 2:35. Okay, we'll take a break for one hour.
Okay,
Meet at 2:35.